go in advance.
Okay, hold on, let me.
Well, they'll definitely have us look at it again, so it's good to like, the one that you looked into, yeah. A lot of perspectives.
I- She's been great.
It's my last go at it, buddy.
Yeah.
Gotta make some waves. Thank you.
No, just a statue up.
Who gave you these? City manager, okay. Yeah, I don't know.
That works best for.
That wasn't me.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody inadvertently.
I was like, I don't.
Now, I have all the numbers here.
We keep eating bread.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Good to see you too.
Hi. That works.
That
makes sense.
Okay.
How are you?
Oh.
We have Wi-Fi here?
We did.
Where's he going?
He had taken some notes from Rack, he sent them over, I told him like these numbers.
I go to
But it turns out that he sent the wrong. He sent last week's, cause I'm like, this is from last. It's like, no, it's this year. I'm like, no. The first one, I very distinctly remember that conversation last year.
All blur together, I'm
I
telling you.
I know.
The ground long enough.
He's like, I wanted you to print it for everyone. I was like, I wasn't gonna print that.
Correct number.
Yeah. Yeah, and I printed them for him. Like, he said he had done, I mean, it's a nice write-up.
All right.
It just. Yeah.
In cracks a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, how are you?
Your hometown woman.
I don't think so.
South.
It was still snowing, like my brother came and visited and then they went back and it snowed again.
Oh,
Like it was like last week or she was pretty rough. Michigan. Yeah. I didn't do it.
Arlington, North Dakota.
I've never been there, Joe North Dakota.
Very far, go. That's an interesting destination.
Yeah, kind of famous from the movie and
Oh, I
the
love the
TV shows.
TV show.
I've only watched one season of the TV show.
I don't remember if I watched the movie or the TV show, but I loved it. The first one that I watched.
Yeah, yeah.
I think with the movie is this actress I like, what's her name? She plays she obviously she's pregnant cop and she's very,
That was a very good movie.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think the movie, that was the movie, not the TV show. Right?
That was the movie. And she had that accent.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'm not sure she.
What? She
Interesting,
like put it
She
on.
acted that accent
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah, she did a great job.
That was a long time ago. That was
That
fun.
was, she's the wife of one of the, that was the Coen brothers.
Yes, I'm brothers, but I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I can't,
I need to know hand when I came. I have it somewhere. like-
Good Norman.
Yes.
You know everything.
Yeah. But you know what? I saw her in something else recently. She was in a movie in the last 2 or 3 years and I hadn't seen her.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we have some.
Okay.
That was a long time.
Are you?
Even 20 years ago.
I feel like I saw it on video. Yeah, oh geez, yeah. Oh my gosh, almost
And
30
Steve-
years
Steve
ago.
Buscemi.
Yeah,
So.
that's right, right in time.
We don't usually get Robert to the public.
That's a-
Like,
It's a good one.
It's a little too graphic because that's my love. They love,
Oh, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah.
seeing blood and.
Dark humor, definitely, but it was
Lots of
good.
blood.
I know, that's what part of what you're saying.
I think I could see it when it came
I
out.
believe it's
I saw it.
96, it's like 30 years.
Yeah. So there is a TV series.
Yes, I've heard of it, but I.
And I think this they were all. I don't like to watch violence that much anymore, so I'm fine. I don't know if I'm gonna continue watching the second.
Ross had to step
Something
away.
about shows on TV. It's getting really close.
I just decided like, I don't need all of this.
Sometimes I do if there's a real dimension to it, but
Yeah.
it's like vicious and it's really a style I'm not into. You know, I didn't like Kill Bill. It was very refreshing style, but I just.
I'm not a Tarantino fan. to be
Uh,
honest.
just so everyone's aware, we're waiting on another member. Ross went up.
Yeah, they don't have a quorum.
But we don't have a quorum yet.
Yeah.
Ross called, he's in traffic coming from Miami.
Ross, he's.
Yeah, or not
I think
Ross,
you do.
but Steve. And Rich said he said traffic's a mess, so it's probably gonna be an hour.
So it's five's a quorum, right? Yeah, so now you do five. Yeah, five is a quorum.
She's saying one more.
There's
Can
one
you
more.
one more?
Okay. Oh, there's 10 appointed now.
Did Mildred respond back or?
Or Melissa, I thought Melissa was coming.
We don't have a.
Did we hear back from Melissa?
Let me look. Thinking. Or maybe.
I didn't send it.
Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? I was sorry. There's some bad.
I'd like to know in the very beginning.
Notes 2025. Let me see, is this it? Yeah, this is it.
Okay.
How do I send this to you?
Yeah, or just do Charmaine.
If you email it to
We
me.
get started.
Yeah, I was thinking, the quorum only matters for items that you have to vote on though, right? So I could open up and then you can skip the first item. So.
I think I need Wi-Fi.
You're on the meeting, still going on for You could probably get going for this point.
Yeah, 5:07.
I don't see a public Wi-Fi.
Okay,
Nice.
have your attention, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We do not have a quorum yet when they do the roll call. At some point, we might be able to get another review. So call the meeting in order for the Budget Advisory Board. April 16th, Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. Can I get a roll call, please?
Here.
Ms. Belker?
Here?
Mr. Kale?
Here.
Camerata?
We have 5 of the 10 members. We do not have a quorum. Thank you. First order of business, we can't vote on to approve the meeting minutes, correct?
Correct, anything with votes, we would just come back.
So we'll have to come back to that if we do get a quorum this evening. I will open at this time the floor up for neighborhood input. I see here there's a couple people that signed up wishing to speak. Would you raise your hand if you? Okay, we'll start with,
Well, actually, we're all from the same group, and so I think we'll let Christian give the speech first.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christian Gray. I'm here with Blaise McGinley and with Maggie Hunt. We're here to advocate on behalf of Silver Bend Civic Association and ask you to consider or pass on the consideration for a master plan to add a master plan to the budget for next year. You may or may not know, last year, the city commission passed funding for a vision plan, which was conducted by a third-party consultant elected by the city. That vision plan is it's going through revisions now. The next obvious step would be to move towards a master plan, which would allow another consultant to come in and help mold Sailboat Bend into the proper historic district and the only historic neighborhood that's in the city of Fort Lauderdale. So we ask that you consider allocating adequate and appropriate funding for the next fiscal year for a master plan for sale event. That is all. Thank you.
Good. Or who would be putting that into their budget? Would be Development Services? CSD item.
BSD, Sustainable Development, they'll be coming with a package.
Okay, that was.
BSD. Yeah.
I know that Commissioner Glassman has expressed an interest in proceeding with that as well, so.
We're excited.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have 5:10 and we now have a quorum. So we now have a quorum. Anyone else wishing to speak from the general public? Thank you for your participation.
Thank
Thank you. So we'll go back for the approval of last meeting minutes for March 19th, 2025. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to do those meeting minutes.
I actually saw Jake Ross, I think, for the last meeting.
I was here last meeting.
Shows you as being.
Yeah, it
If
shows
you look at the number.
It says
look
project.
attendance, the only absence was Ms. Smith.
I don't think I was absent at all.
I missed that.
But yeah, but that was, this is, the absence accumulation started back in October.
That one missing.
That one missing? Yeah,
That one missing.
and it shows you one, then we've had 2 meetings that you've been present. It was January. We met in January.
I missed one last year, I think.
February.
There's no fire.
So this should be corrected. I have a motion to accept the meeting minutes. Motion by Melissa, second by Harvey. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposition? Pass. Only thing under old business for the ones that weren't at yesterday's workshop with the city commission. First order of business was the non-for-profits. They have given us a pass. They do not want our involvement in scoring, ratings, suggestions. They're leaving it up to the city manager. Laura, I know Raquel has some ideas. Are you comfortable? Or, I mean, are we talking?
Yeah, I can share what was said. So at the end of the meeting, the city manager shared that she would consider putting a placeholder number to discuss, and then we would rank later in the process. And if the commission was interested in a competitive process, so that was the takeaway, was that, you know, there's an opportunity depending on the balancing of the budget to have a placeholder for not-for-profits to later compete for, and that could be through a third-party organization separate from the city or using a city process. We didn't get into that.
The only one that is locked in for a certain number of years was for the Huizenga Park
Right?
project.
Yeah, that's an interlocal agreement.
That wasn't nonprofit money.
It isn't, but so the BAB actually asked for us to include it on the list because it was a contribution to an organization outside of the city.
The 5 million?
So it was over 7 years, so it's 5 million paid over 7
So
years.
is that an investment that, I was under the impression that we'll get paid that money back.
No, so that's the city's contribution towards the park. The intent is that the park would now be maintained forever as a public space for others to use as well. So the city also has an obligation where we pay 100,000 a year towards the operating and maintenance.
There wasn't
of
a
the park.
lending part of that?
They were leveraging the city's dollars to secure funding. It's a $15 million park, so we're 5 million of the 15 million, and they will use the city's payment to leverage a loan.
Yeah, that's what I.
taken.
So, but the BAB at that time asked us to include it on the list so that we could track that as a
Well,
contribution.
I remember
where we
having, I
can take
remember us
it off.
approving the 5 million.
Right.
Like, we're not approving it, but recommending
Recommending it.
to move it forward. Whatever, okay.
What is a
I
new,
thought there was an investment portion of that. There was some type of revenue generating or something. It wasn't just free money. I didn't think it was just a free $5 million.
So there's three components to their fundraising, right? The first component was the city paying in 5 million. The second component was a restaurant that was going to generate revenue to secure additional 5 million. And then the third 5 million was gonna be through fundraising. So they broke that up into 3 pots. To say we're gonna have a $15 million park improvement, here's the 3 ways that are going to fund it. The city, restaurant revenue, and then fundraising.
I have a question. Why in the first place was the BAB involved initially and tasked with that selection and that, all that work and screening that you mentioned?
For
From the ground.
what are you talking? Are you
For the
talking about
non-profit.
nonprofit? Okay, so you just switch gears back to what he was talking about. We
Yeah.
were talking about,
Yeah.
okay, well, it's kind of the same
If you
thing,
don't
right?
mind.
No, it's, you're saying it was lumped in, but it's, I'm trying to figure out whether that
No,
was
I got your
nonprofit.
question and I appreciate it, but I have another question about that. I was curious as to that reaction during the workshop with the commission. Why did we, in the first place, why did we fall into that work when it's going back to the city?
We're on the board.
Yeah, so we're talking about the process of finding the best use of our dollars for.
Criteria and selection.
So forgive me, because that wasn't involved in that process. That's why I was a little confused. So the process for nonprofits was, we got, I think, like 1,100 applications. The city created this process where everybody can apply. And the board, we all looked through all of these and ranked them by our numbers that we came up to. And then we presented it to the commission because they said it was okay for us to do that. And it was completely overlooked.
I heard that yesterday at the workshop.
Yes.
What I'm asking is why in the first place was it assigned to the BAB when I heard yesterday from the city commission that it was not supposed to be our job and we were not the best qualified to do it?
So I didn't hear that because
Well,
I
I was
wasn't
there
there.
yesterday.
So at
They
the,
said we weren't
That's my
qualified. I would
understanding.
have stood
That's
up
my-
and said,
that's
excuse
my
me.
understanding.
That part.
I would have stood up and said, excuse me.
Well,
but
qualified,
finish-
maybe
to finish
best,
that.
the best use of our
Best suited.
time.
It was Bab's idea to go to the commission to ask them if we could put together some type of screening process and they said, sure.
Okay.
And that's why it all
That
happened.
was an initiative.
And they
from,
apparently didn't like the outcome.
Yes.
And
the
so
mayor-
now,
The mayor made
since
that clear.
then, they have shut us off. Our whole mission was to have a bona fide vetting process that we could go back to the taxpayer to say, this institution is gonna take care of this part of the city, these kids in the city, and this is the reason why we gave them the money.
And I think it made sense.
Which I think is a fiduciary obligation of the city, but we're being told that they don't want it. And
So
that's
we
what
don't
we are.
have to challenge that view.
That's why now over the last few meetings, it's been a sensitive topic for ruling and me, because it was a lot of work, so. We spent a lot of time on it, Chair. I think we can comfortably say they don't want our involvement and move on.
But that does not preclude us as we work towards a budget
Yes.
recommendation, that if there has to be cuts,
We recommend that, but we don't even know how much.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
but
been 2 million, it's been roughly 2 million, I think.
2.6.
I heard that number.
If you count in the Izinga Park, and because I just got the update yesterday.
Scale of the overall budget, it's a drop, but it's worth looking
Now,
at.
out of a $450 million operating budget, it comes out of the operating, that's correct, the general fund, yes.
What I think was important is Commissioner Earps insisted on having those criterias, including some outcomes and impact from those non-for-profit, rather than just action or money given. And I think that's a great approach that the BAB should actually continue to promote.
Oh, then you need to go in front of the commission and say this is what we need to do.
Well, I'm saying it
We've
today as a
Well,
new board member.
Let just,
We agree.
let me just say, well, we will work with the city manager
Yes,
on working, reinforcing that.
Right.
thought.
because she will be in the meetings and.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And then just other old business, basically it was simply from yesterday's meeting, kind of three areas we wanted to try to get some feedback on from the commission, kind of where they were at with the millage rate. Going in, I kind of had a sense that they're not interested in an increase in millage rate at this point. I mean, we don't know until they get into the budget numbers. It's still a little premature. The addition, and then what additional resources are needed. And Commissioner Herbst expressed that there needs to be properly funded police department, overtime, properly funded, and the resources that public safety and the police need. And then Commissioner Pittman expressed that her need for resources as it pertains to wireless, Wi-Fi, accessibility for some of her areas in District 3 does not have the IT.
Infrastructure. Broadband, she was.
Those were pretty much the only initiatives other than what's been discussed at the workshop.
Mr. Chair, I also heard sidewalk from one of the commissioners.
Yeah, and just going back, there's been a $60 million bond. And then it's a 30-year bond, correct, Laura?
I'm not sure, are you talking about sidewalks?
Sidewalks.
Oh, so there is no bond yet. It was discussed at goal setting, the potential of using our cash funded appropriations for streets and sidewalks that we use to maintain sidewalks and streets to leverage debt so that we can expedite those projects. But that hasn't moved forward yet, and it hasn't gone back to the commission with specific projects. You wanna
Yeah,
say
so
more?
I mean, we're gonna, in the next month or so, bring the proposed projects, and then I believe in about a month, we'll have a bond resolution that combines the line of credit that we took out for the police headquarters with that 60 million, so it'll be about $100 million that we'll be issuing.
Like 100 million. And I have a question. I know that we've had issues over the last couple of years with not money, because we've got hundreds of millions of dollars at our disposal. It's actually getting the materials and finding the workers to do the work. Has that softened at all?
In terms of completing capital projects, he's asking about, is it still a challenge
It's
in
still a
public
challenge,
works?
yeah, I mean, the market hasn't switched really too much at all. You'd think it would, given what's going on with the economy, but we haven't seen it yet.
But some of what we were looking at the 60 million were roadway resurfacing as an example, and that's gonna be something that's really easy. You know, we have contractors on board, and so that's gonna be one that we're gonna be able to spend that money pretty quickly. And then there's the sidewalks and seawalls that would also be included in
In
that.
that 60 million.
Yeah,
And-
and I just don't know the breakout of how much for each kind of initiative. We're working on that.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but historically, there's been 1.5 million put in the CIP line, the budget for sidewalks, streets. And that will continue to be in the budget fund amount, a placeholder to be used to pay for the bond.
The debt service, right?
Yeah,
So it was about
debt service.
1.5 million for roadways, 1.5 for sidewalks. And there was a little extra too, like 3
For
point, yeah, there's like 3 point something that we would just make that a debt service payment and get some projects jump started.
And then this is just, the 60 million is just, it doesn't cover the entire, because what was it?
700 million is that presentation we made like
Yeah.
a year ago.
But that 700 million included the part that I'm most concerned about are the bridges.
Yeah, it did.
And I would like, maybe now is not the forum, but I'd like to find out where we are with those.
And bridges could be part of the 60. I mean, again, we're just kind of working
Yeah,
on
but
that
that's
allocation.
60 million. If you start putting bridges, it's gonna go fast.
Well, it needs to go. It's the bridges.
So can we put that as well, that will come up during the budget discussions next month,
Which part?
the bridges.
Oh.
Or should we put that in the May meeting to discuss?
So the May meetings are your meetings with departments. If you'd like for us to add a small presentation at the beginning or end, it could take away from the allocation from the departments. That's up to you all.
I don't know, yeah, because that could be a 20-minute discussion in itself.
I don't think and respectfully, Chief Chair, I think we can do that, but how much can we change or advise or impact by the time that we're in intent spend? If it's in motion, right, and we've identified the issues and we're funding to fix them.
See, you focused on $2.6 million for the non-profit process. I think the 60 million is worth our attention.
But it's already been appropriated, they've already,
No,
but you have a plan in place to move forward with.
No, we're gonna be bringing one to the city commission that's gonna say, here's how we're planning, or we propose to allocate the 60. And maybe it's 30 million for resurfacing, 10 million for sidewalks, 10 million for. So it would be, so that's what we were gonna be bringing to the commission, not the May 6th meeting. I think we're slating it for May 20th.
And the flair of the commission at the prior organization workshop was that they were all pretty much consensus.
When we were here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving them the authority to start moving forward at that 60 million.
When did we have that presentation on the bridges? Were you here?
Yeah, it was out of the
2 years ago?
airport.
It was last year.
And
Remember the bridges?
We gave it to the
Alan,
commission.
Alan Dodd did it, yeah.
There's an
We did a commission presentation and then we did it here, like after.
Yeah, so at that time, the push was on behalf of staff was trying to get a geo bond on for the last election, so it was before that. So staff wanted the commission to consider some projects to go out to the voters to approve a geo bond. But that was presented, it didn't move forward at that time, so now we're looking for other strategies.
We're on bridges. Did the bridge at Per Bowling's place get fixed? Do we know?
It's not done.
It's
not
not,
done.
Not done, but it's
Yeah.
being fixed.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's definitely.
Yeah, it's
There was an
underway.
issue with
Little
FPL and, yeah, it was delayed, so, but it's being repaired.
So can we at least ask for an updated list?
Yes, I'd like to know where we are.
Yeah.
And I thought it was underway 2 years ago.
What's
I
that?
don't even know how many.
I know we discussed this in depth and I know that there was monies already discussed. We knew how much it was. We knew we were gonna attack it and now
Surtax.
2 years later, we're talking about it again and it hasn't been even remotely executed. And that's a concern.
I think it's closed down because it's in the replacement process right now.
Bridges are important, okay?
And those 60 millions are worth a conversation with the BAB, I think.
Well, that we are.
Okay,
So just to be clear, are y'all asking that we bring it back at the beginning or end of department presentations in May? Just for staff purposes?
it's
Public Works.
Public Works. Do we want to have it in their presentation?
I think
That's a 5 to
Go
10
to the
minute update.
commission first.
So Chair would recommend we put that on the agenda for the meeting.
All right.
So
What-
not,
I'm sorry.
Chair recommends we put that on the agenda for the May meeting. Discussion, therefore then cut into 5 or 10 minutes of his presentation.
Have some stats, just statistics on the bridges and.
So so the 3 May meetings are all department meetings. Are you just asking for Public Works to include that in?
Well,
When he
if one
presents?
meeting is dedicated, it's we have a meeting, it's the official meeting for that month.
But we use that.
May 21st is Public Works.
Right, but so the meeting that is typically the regular BAB meeting is repurposed for department presentations. We don't have a separate meeting.
Well, this
So
should
we
be.
open as a regular meeting.
We do
and
have a
you-
separate, we have public input, that's what's been done in the past, hasn't
But it's for 5 minutes at the beginning and then the meeting's repurposed, so.
it? Right,
Okay, so are you asking that that's a separate meeting or as part of the Public Works presentation on May
the 21st.
May 21st?
Their presentation.
Okay,
If it's their
I just-
department,
I just don't want to cut into their lot, we're going 20 minutes, and they
we'll
have
give you 30.
So to address bridges is part of the presentation.
So you get an extra 10 minutes.
Bridges are the whole kind of what the plan is for the 60.
Well, it's really.
The bridges, the number of them they were rating on, like, let's say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and some of there were a few that were critical, whatever the terms were that they, you know.
Yeah.
Some were fine, replaced within 20 years, whatever, but it's not. That weird.
Yeah. Well, I was told that 20+ bridges were at that higher level of having to be replaced. Maybe, Anthony, if you know something different than that number, but a lot. 34, how many do we have in the city? 34, is that the number? Is that right?
That sounds about right. I can't remember the exact number.
It'll be interesting to see how the commission feels about that 60 million. Is that split amongst all 4 districts equally? which has been some discussion lately. But personally, I think it should be on the highest priorities first.
Well, and we have,
course.
you know, those comprehensive plans for each of these things. So we have the roadway scores, right? From
Yeah.
worst to best. We have we have those evaluated across the board.
And I think that should be a recommendation. Have that they use those priority scores for this process. That would only be a recommendation from us. It's entirely up to the commission then at that point. Okay, so that's all I have under old business. unless-
Chair, I did have, just in my notes from yesterday, that Commissioner Glassman did bring up the CRA and wanted our recommendations on continuation of the CRA. I know they already cut the funding in half.
They already signed.
And he brought up, I need to do a little research on this, but he brought up Invest Florida, replacing the CRA, and he just did mention this as maybe a discussion point for us, so.
And then I've not had the opportunity to get with the new city manager to find out how she wants to, for us to proceed on that.
Okay.
I think we need, you not agree, Laura, that we need to involve you and city manager for how they want us to proceed.
Right, so the CRA was presented to the board twice. We could bring it back again if you wanted a presentation again.
There was a decision on that already.
So during goal setting, staff received direction to move forward with requesting to extending the extension. The item will still need to come back to the commission to vote on. So we're working with the county to draft an interlocal agreement to extend the CRA.
And actually
So they
do
would, it would need to come back to the commission still to vote on. So direction was provided to work with the county to bring that agreement back. The agreement hasn't been voted on yet.
So as of now, Broward has said no more, but we're trying to get them to say, yes, we'll do something.
Because through the state, the county has the power to extend CRAs, even if they're not going to be contributing their TIF. We have to have a interlocal agreement with them to have longer time to spend our money and for us to extend our TIF. So there needs to be an agreement, even if they're not adding money.
So they can
to the
agree
cities.
even if they're not gonna contribute.
Yeah, they need to agree.
They
Yeah.
need to agree.
Mhm.
When do we expect that?
So a letter was drafted to them, I believe it was sent last week, to request that or to let them know we want to move forward with that interlocal agreement. And so their attorney will be drafting it
But the
hopefully
decision from our
before break.
commission is yes, we are gonna continue with it.
The direction we were provided was to move forward with extending at 50% of the city's
Right,
TIF for 10 years to reevaluate every 2
Do we
years.
know if that's even impactful because of the amount of money they're losing and not getting from us and from Broward? I mean, is it even gonna do anything, the money that we're just gonna give to them? No,
To
are we-
who?
$10 million?
It's gonna be, so it'll
Five.
be 5 to 6 million depending on the, the growth, but yeah, it's significant in the city's budget, $5-6 million.
I think
to
that
contribute
Commissioner
to the CRA.
Glassman yesterday just brought up the fact that, hey, we are going in this direction with funding it at 50%. It's $5 million, but as we're talking about these other items, like the nonprofits did come up. He just asked for the BAB recommendations on should we continue with
think we already did.
50%.
Our recommendations were out there.
Mm-mm.
I don't
We-
think
we
we
set
made
them
a formal
forward last
recommendation.
year.
We had discussion, but we've never
Right.
made a formal
Formal.
recommendation
Correct.
because we were told to hold off until the goal workshop or in January, and we did, but it was never brought up at the January workshop, goal setting prioritization meeting. And that's when they made the decision, and so that kind of ended it for us. The other thing I need to point out is there's pending legislation in Tallahassee that will make this all a moot point if it passes as written on
Meaning,
extending the CRA or not being given the authority to extend the CRA after it dies this year. Yeah,
when's
but
that?
but then there's been an amendment introduced. I don't want to get it.
The last we heard from our legislative affairs contact is that it didn't make it to the committee meeting. So it's paused and we don't know if it'll come back or not, but the committee meeting where it would have been heard, it was not heard. And so it's a little bit on pause now, but I mean, I'm not gonna predict what
They're
happens
in
with
session
LLC.
in another month.
May 2nd.
So
Second.
May second.
So Melinda, are you under the impression that the commission, I know one, but do you think the commission wants us to come with?
Yeah,
Or is
so
she just saying that because.
this was only probably referenced, I mean, and you guys were there too, like by Commissioner Glassman. He
Yes.
asked, so it was kind of like just the recommendation from Commissioner Herbst, you know, to make sure we're budgeting for public safety, Pamela Beasley Pittman for citywide broadband. This was Commissioner Glassman's input to us, was that what would be our recommendation on continuing the CRA at the 5 million that they're planning on?
Use the term, use our expertise. Remember.
Yeah,
this.
so this was just, they didn't collectively agree with each other on any of these specific communications to us. That was just like one by one. So I just wanted to make sure that we
Yeah,
included
But I
it since
just-
we're going
I don't
over
want
this.
us to make a recommendation and they're gonna do like they did with the non-for-profits, do with.
I didn't know what a CRA was prior to 5-6 years ago, okay? And in learning about it, and then we had a presentation, a full presentation from the CRA board or whoever was running that. And I learned a lot about it, and the numbers that we're talking about now are substantially lower than what they've been getting. And so when they were in here talking about what we're gonna do with this money, this is what we're planning on doing, this is what we're planning on doing, this is what's happening in the city. How can we make any recommendation without bringing that forward again to understand what impact that 5 million will have, if at all anything? And what are their plans to use the money? Cause I will bring up just one place, and I don't think we have anything, but that Holly Blue, that $250,000 from the CRA, and they're out of business. So what are they doing with the money,
About outcomes.
right? And we give them 5 million a year, they're just doing this and opening up restaurants?
There also the opportunity to give them money as needed, as opposed to saying $5 million.
Per project or
Because
something?
what I got from the commission yesterday was also taking a look at where we can cut.
Yeah,
So.
I think this was part of that.
Right, and I think that might be where he was coming from his.
That was my understanding from Commissioner Glassman. He was sort of recapping the sentiment of several commissioners. The cost saving, I think was his exact wording, and was looking forward to hearing Bab's input or expertise again, that's the word he used. So I think we should not default on that. I think it's a good opportunity to show that we can maybe come up with some interesting ideas.
Like
So-
at the meeting too, I mean, when they brought up the tax, everyone was no, yeah, everyone was
Of course they are.
no. And then when they went right into, is there other opportunities for cost cutting and additional revenue? Those were the first two things I mentioned, and then it kind of fell this. And I mentioned this, you know, is it appropriate that we reach out to our representatives, our commissioners, you know,
Yeah.
specifically and say, hey, you know, you mentioned specifically Herbst mentioned cost cutting. What are you thinking? You know, like, what are some ideas so that we can bring those back? Because
Well-
obviously there's people with,
If I may, you can reach out, but you can't really share back
Until the
here
meeting.
in a public forum, so for your own knowledge as you're representing, but otherwise you could be considered a conduit if you're sharing what different elected officials feel on a topic, so just be careful
Can
about
we pull
that.
meeting, or find the date of when we had that presentation from the CRA, and
Absolutely.
we'll just watch the video or read the
For
notes?
new members, board members like
Yeah.
me,
That would be really
useful.
That would
Yeah.
be very useful.
Yeah.
And my understanding, Chair, was that the feeling from Bab at the time was if Broward County says no, we say no. That was like a feeling for it. And now Broward County's saying no, we came in and said yes, and now they're coming back to us saying, what should we do?
In the
I
hospital.
wasn't, again, I am the least experienced in CRA, I said that from the front, but I was not impressed by what I was seeing. What that means, I don't know, I'd have to dig into it more. From what I was seeing, the stuff that they were investing the money in. No, I think they still had a whole bunch of money with $30 million, how much money is still in there?
40
million?
around 40 million.
They
from
really
there.
need another 5 million? What are they doing?
Could the BAB receive the most recent audited CRA
I
financials?
think it's another meeting.
Like,
Sure.
just I think as a,
That's what I-
just as a reference
for,
point.
Where do we fit it in between now and?
We're gonna have a separate meeting.
Yeah.
Just for CRA. If that's what, maybe we need to send a note to commission if we can and ask them, is you want us to go, do you want us to do this? We'll take the time and do it, but what's the temperature?
Yeah, so I was gonna say.
And it was just.
Feel them out.
To get us to the commission will be a month.
Don't waste any
Yeah, yeah.
time. Feel them out.
I mean, and I think he was just, but he knew that was 5 million, so I think that that's why.
But did he vote for it? Someone voted for it to continue.
He said he did not support it, but none of the other commissioners said anything when he's, suggested us auditing it. He did also say we need to look into what is it called, Invest FTL, we created that in
Invest Florida
Invest Florida.
was going to replace the CRA, and what is the status of that?
Invest Fort Lauderdale.
I think
Is that
it's
tax
FTL,
rollover? That
yeah.
account rolls over, obviously.
What's that?
They have 40 million in there again.
Fort Lauderdale, okay.
Yeah, so the 40 million is actually dedicated to projects, so it's committed to
Yeah.
projects that are underway, so as projects like Holly Blue or another, project reaches certain thresholds, they do reimbursements, so that 40 million is actually in project accounts dedicated to developments that are underway.
You're saying it definitely is, or you're saying most of it probably is?
No, it is, because otherwise it wouldn't roll from year to year.
Okay.
So because of how our accounting works.
Some of those projects won't even get up and going.
So,
Is that correct?
So what happened to the money?
It's sitting there.
So it's in a bank account, as a government, when you make a commitment through a contract, you encumber the money, so it commits the money for a
So
specific
it's sort of
purpose.
earmarked, but they
And
never
then-
happen.
Then it rolls from year to year as the money's spent down.
And do we ever use that money for other goals or
You'd have to-
allocation if we know that, for instance, this project will not happen?
You'd have to first take an agreement back to the commission to uncommit it. So you'd have to break that agreement with the developer or with whoever the agreement's
And
with.
that has happened?
And then it would free up the money to be.
Is there
spent.
like does anybody know offhand, is there like a 2-3 year outlook looking backwards and saying every year typically there's 30 or 40 million that's not spent, or what is typically happening?
It's a lot more than that.
Like how much cash is sitting there that's earmarked, but it's like an eye roll?
Right now.
So I can generically tell you that the Northwest CRA in recent years has grown a lot. So they didn't have this
Those are
kind
the
of,
taxes.
they didn't have this kind of cash in prior years. But as the developments come on board, they've gotten a lot more because the county contributes and we contribute. And so there's been large dollar amounts. And what they did is they took some of the money and they leveraged debt
Yeah.
to move these projects far forward, knowing that the CRA was going to sunset. So this is beyond what you would see in any normal year.
That's
And
what I'm
it's
wondering.
because they issue debt to move forward a lot of development projects before they sunset.
so Laura, let me ask you, what is the procedure for this board to request a special? Can we amongst ourselves create a special meeting just for this?
Yes.
Do we wanna make sure, cause if it was one commissioner, we need to figure out if,
That's the question.
then
Well, the problem is we have to communicate that to the commission
on the commission.
and get it on, takes usually 2 meetings?
For clarification.
Yeah, so typically you would need approved minutes from this board before we move an item to the commission to make sure that
They
the
go to
minutes are
recess.
accurate. But you all could set something on your agenda. You could add an hour to the beginning or to the end of a meeting if you want for that
We're
purpose.
gonna need this, we're gonna need a
Um,
presentation.
Yeah,
Right.
that's,
So-
Refresh on the CRA.
Yeah.
so.
And then all of us
so
should
that-
watch the video from 2 years ago, year ago, and then catch up and then if.
And we'll need the latest audit
So let's
We'll leave it up to
decide.
you to make the decision whether we
I
just.
wanna, I want this to be, do we want a 3-hour meeting for one of the meetings in May, tack an hour on?
I believe it's important enough for
Yeah, I
us, at the time we are tasked with finding cost savings or potential cost savings. Overall, I think it's a good idea to look at that element, that's not negligible.
So with a May 21st meeting, we just had the regular meeting of May
I think
21st.
May 7th, I think the
Fire.
fire and police presentations go longer, but
Okay,
let's, I don't know, I mean, which ones usually go longer here, and I would just tail onto that meeting, which is typically not as long.
does that have to be noticed?
IT, I don't think is gonna be very long, finance is not gonna go long at all, human resource not gonna go long, I think the first. My
Okay.
opinion.
So
So May-
how do we
you're trying to
public,
do May
we have to
7th?
public notice that meeting?
So all of your meetings are publicly noticed. The May 7 and May 14 won't count for attendance purposes for you all, but all of your meetings are publicly noticed.
Nate, we'll add that as a special agenda item on the May 7th meeting. Is that the consensus?
You all think that's the shortest one?
Yes, I won't be there, so you guys.
Oh,
Yeah,
come
I'll
on.
be traveling, but let me ask you this, though, you mentioned watching the recording in advance, I thought we just started recording this year. Did we record those in the previous years?
So the year before was a little tricky because we were at a bunch of different spots, but I think they were all recorded and videoed, but they just weren't posted online, so we can ask Sharday, get with.
It was a good presentation.
I don't know that we still have access to the ones that are over.
For us to refer.
Yeah.
So we'll follow up on whether or not that's available.
So, yeah, that's the question.
Is it 2024 or-
Can they join by Zoom?
Just
Yeah.
forget what's behind it.
I think in the
Like,
past,
let us know.
you've been able to,
It's like a
even though it's not a counted meeting, we still have the capability of letting them join us on Zoom. Board
CRE,
members.
board members, oh yeah, you can join by Zoom.
So if he's not able to be at the May 7th, he can still participate, even though it's not a mandatory meeting via Zoom.
Yeah, we could confirm, we need to follow up with the clerk's office to make sure that they have capability to help us with that. but
Is there anyone else having any meeting so that they're not gonna be out in May?
That would apply for me on May 21st. I had a trip planned a year ago.
I'll confirm time, because I'll be on site with the, in.
And then just communicate that, just.
Ask Charmaine to
And
coordinate.
Laura, we were able to do that and at the city manager search committee, our first meeting, we did allow a member to attend by Zoom, and it was clarified to us that it was allowed for I think maybe only once for attendance purposes, but like you said, some of these don't even matter for attendance, but we did have a board member here in this room on Zoom.
When you record these too, so I was planning to watch them afterward.
This way, if you're able to just be.
Yeah.
Not to be technical, but I believe from my partner's experience, if you're traveling abroad, it's gonna create complications for your IT department. I think they don't like that. It hasn't happened. I remember we were somewhere in the world and it was denied.
Yeah.
Only
So,
for hacking purposes that we discussed.
so for May 7th, we'll have, plan on being here at least 3 hours, possibly 3 hours a day.
That's it.
What's the pleasure, front end or back end? Probably back end, so that way staff or the department heads don't have to stick around.
So,
'Cause I
From
think
7 to
we're gonna
8 would
public
be
safety and keep it one way.
Oh, 6:30 to 7:30. We're gonna get finance in and out in 5 minutes.
okay, last, so
2
CRA
minutes,
will be
2
on.
minutes, I love it.
I'm not cutting any department head short. We kind of.
She'll cut herself short.
Listen, I'm short, so you can cut me short.
Okay, moving along. Moving into new business, Laura, well, Ross, I'll turn that over to you on the revenue estimating conference meeting updates.
Yes, yes, did we print?
We were able to print.
Thank you.
Right?
You want- I mean, we can send it out via email
Okay,
unless.
in case they wanna take notes or something, I think. All right, so I had the pleasure of chairing the revenue estimating committee for the 3rd year. I'm gonna miss it, it's fun, I enjoy it actually. It's like speed dating. All right, so we went through all the departments, and of course you all can chime in if you wanna dig deeper. What I've given you is just my quick notes that I think are the most important that came out of it. We had. I read the committees. All the notes are available. We went over there. What I'm gonna do is just go over the departments and what stood out to me. And then there's a couple of things that we need and suggestions that I've made. So first, developmental services, business tax is estimated at 3.5 million in revenue in 2026. Last rate increase for that was 1997. So my suggestion is to speak to the commission and consider increasing those fees. If they're looking for ways of increasing revenue, that's one of them.
What was the amount of the rate increase in 1997?
I don't know that answer, sir.
More or less.
Don't know. Have to ask that question that we, developmental services. 1997 was the last increase. In 2023, which is 3 years ago as a budget, we made 3.4 million. And 2026, we're only looking at 3.5 million in a city that has grown
Okay.
substantially.
Yeah.
So that's a big recommendation I think that we should make, is consider increasing those fees, the business tax line.
Just for point of clarification, staff presented this to the commission at a workshop 2 months ago.
Yes.
And it was kind of the field consensus that they weren't interested in raising the business tax.
And that's okay, but they're interested in funding nonprofits, so we gotta find revenue. Reviewed fees estimated at 220,000, revenues dropping 44% from 2005 to 2026. Last rate increase was 2022. Consider increasing those fees. Building permit fees are estimated at 310,000, decreasing from 695 to 310. So those two alone, I think we talked about this, is clearly showing a slowdown in building in the city. I think that's accurate to say. So more pressure on our millage comes to concern, right? Building permit fees estimated at 310, estimated decreasing from 695 to 310. Last increase was, I don't know the answer, that's why it's highlighted in yellow. If we can get that answer, that would be important. And find out when they were last increased, and if it was like all the other ones, we should increase the fees. Parks and Recreation, youth program fees are estimated at 180,000. Last increase was 2017. I think our parks are nicer than they were in 2017. Again, suggestion to commission to increase those fees. This is the biggest one. This one cracks me up. I love it. Tennis lessons, $430,000 for the city. Last year at this committee, I asked, what about pickleball? And it was kind of a question, well, I don't know, but we have Fort now. The Fort is gonna look in revenue coming in from there of approximately 150,000. And also there should be some additional revenue for pickleball as pickleball continues to grow and lessons are starting to use. So there you go on that one. Parks and Recreation, swim clubs estimated at 402,000. Last increase 2017. I believe our pool is much nicer than it was in 2017. And I think that we should talk to the commission about increasing those fees as well. Finance, lean research fees are estimated at 900,000. Linda, you might be able to answer this for us. The last increase for lean research fees.
Over 5 years, what we did do was we changed the process about 3 or 4 years ago, where we used to allow for both a standard and expedited service. And we went away from the standard fee and just do an expedited fee now. So everybody pays the higher fee because we no longer do it in-house. We outsource the lien service process through to a contractor. It's been over 5 years it's changed, the rates have changed.
That tells me that we're spending more money to manage that money by having another third party handle it.
It actually is less staff time for us.
Okay.
Because it took a lot of staff time to go into the different systems to get it. When we onboarded that contractor, he was able to connect to the different subsystems that he has to pull the data directly from them. So it actually alleviates staff time.
So from what I see here, we're estimating 2024, we made $1 million. 2022 was 1.3 almost. The estimate for 2025 is 936. And the department, which sometimes knows as much as the budget, but they're at 875. So we see these fees going lower.
Well, what it is it's hard to predict the amount of sales that are gonna be in an area, right? So we're looking at history of sales. We're just using what we're doing now to say we're gonna keep it status quo, and that's why we did the 875.
Okay, the commission has the right to increase those fees. I think we should increase those fees, or at least talk to the commission about increasing those fees. That's a suggestion that I have. All right, police and fire. Fines and local ordinance violations is estimated 270,000. Revenue decreasing from 25 to 26, from 360 to 270. Police chief talked about this. If you can maybe give us a little bit more of the the ticketing motor units down from 10 to 5. And how that's impacted and where you see the potential for the future of.
Okay, so in a nutshell, it's important to keep in mind the city gets a fraction of any traffic citation from the state, everyone else gets their hands in it. Our motor unit is the lowest staffed it's been in many years, so that's part of it. And then reassignment to special events and extended operations. Motor unit is assigned, for instance, during spring break, they're assigned to the beach for 6 weeks. So they don't have citywide enforcement efforts during that time. They enforce out there. This year, we wrote about 4,000 citations during spring break. That's good. But that's primarily, the motor unit is the primary generator of citation revenue, but that revenue, when you look at the grand scheme of thing of revenue, it's never gonna be up there to the point where you think it's going to be.
Couple of comments or questions and comments. This 270,000 that we're estimated to bring in, is that actual money coming into the city? Or that's the portion of the fines that are coming into the city?
That's the actual revenue that should post to the city.
So that's the portion of the tickets that we're getting, right?
Do we have any projection now of the school zone speed cameras? What
Not
that
at this time. Yeah, we don't know when that program's gonna officially be online, so we don't know exactly how much we're going to get at that time. Once the camera company is selected, they're gonna give us projections regarding what they believe will be the end of the year, but we don't have them at this time.
And that's for all the high schools and
It's gonna be what we discussed in the meeting yesterday. We have another one coming up. Initially, it was one school in each of the 4 districts. We're expanding that. We're gonna recommend 12 schools citywide for the immediate rollout, which would be an elementary, high school, middle school in each district, if that particular to that. We went back and realized if we select schools that are on state roads, we may be waiting a while for permits. So what we're doing is we're reassessing schools that are primarily county and city roads. And those will be our priority for selection.
and private schools as well.
They're included.
So are those gonna be specifically for tickets for speed?
Specifically.
And you
yes.
think that that will have a positive impact to this?
Hopefully, yes. We do have to hire staff for that because a number of these tickets, as you can imagine, are gonna be disputed and taken to court. So we have 2 staff members associated with just the fine portion being disputed in court.
When
Yeah,
we
there will be-
budgeted this in the existing year's budget, we assumed it was gonna be revenue neutral, that what we generated in revenue would have an equal expense associated with it. And that was the payment to the vendor and the staff were the 2 primary expenses associated with that.
And keep in mind, that needs to be negotiated with whichever company is selected.
And that's.
So why do it if it's neutral?
Safety,
Yeah,
So that's
it was a
perception
commission
and
priority.
So that brings me to my motor question again. We can't distinguish who is a motor unit versus not, right?
Motorcycles.
So, no,
You can't? What do you mean?
motors or motorcycles?
Yeah.
Motor,
That's
yes,
I think
yes.
motor units, the ones, okay.
Those
So
are the
these
individuals.
Motorcycles,
There are traffic unit,
traffic unit.
and they primarily ride motorcycles. Yes.
Raise your hand if you've seen a police officer on a motorcycle pull someone over in the past 10 years. Oh, I didn't want to raise my hand, sorry. I did not see one. I haven't seen one.
I've seen them in a
You have been
school.
the person pulled over.
Schools
I've seen them in school zones.
So I'm just trying to understand because you said something about the cameras, you know, for safety, but also for perception, for letting people know that you're gonna get a ticket if you speed through here. I think that's as important for having more of these units out there. We talked about this and the perception of the police being there will slow down crime, speeding, all this stuff. So my question is do you wanna be down to 5 motors or do you want 10?
We had, at one time, we had 18.
18. So
Yeah.
we want 18 down to 5. Is that the vision of the city to take away police presence from the road? Or was it a budgeting concern? Was it prior chiefs? What, how did this happen?
I think, are you talking about bringing in the camera program? Is that it?
Oh, now I'm talking
As
about
opposed
physical
to-
units.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, and again, I was not the chief during all those years, they reallocated those officers to other areas, patrol. A couple went to, Detective Bureau, and then got 3 that are on light duty right now with injuries. So that's all impacted everything that's related to that unit.
So I must have missed this. Why are there are only 5 ticketing out of the 10? I thought there was 11 motor units.
Down to 5.
Yeah, right now, we're currently at 5 active motor units. 3 of them are on their motor unit technically, but they're on light duty because they're injured.
And just to clarify, the revenue decreasing from 360,000 to 270,000, is that that revenue is solely from the motor units, the motorcycles?
No, so.
So that's all of the citations.
Citations
Okay.
are issued during traffic crashes. Patrol officers do their own traffic
Okay.
stops. But by and large, the traffic unit, that is their primary purpose. They're the ones who issue the majority in bulk.
Sure, the traffic unit, that is their revenue projection. And the motor unit is just a smaller, it's a small.
5.
It's 5 out of the whole traffic unit.
But they still issue the majority of traffic.
Oh, they do the majority.
So that's what.
They are the traffic unit.
They are the traffic.
They are the traffic. Their sole
That's my
purpose is to
Ah,
enforce traffic
okay.
regulations and laws.
Okay, gotcha.
So Chief,
Their
do you have,
primary purpose.
That's their okay.
No,
May
please
I ask
ask
a
the
question?
question. Yeah, please.
Sure.
do you have a request somewhere in your fiscal year 2026 to ask for more money to get back to a significant motor unit team? If you believe it's effective,
This time, that's not part of the budget plan.
you don't believe it would have an impact, significant impact?
And I'll state the same thing I stated yesterday. I believe any officers added to my staff will have an impact. But you're asking me specifically if in a few weeks, you're gonna hear for a package above base or the motor unit expansion, you're not. Not this year.
So,
Because he has
great.
higher priorities.
We'll
So
talk-
I understand that.
Right.
We'll talk more then, Chief. I totally appreciate it. Police and fire run the city. Not really, you know what I'm saying, like, without you all, we don't have a city. And so for us and for my constituents, when I hear, I don't hear a lot, but anything I hear has to do with police. Nothing more. And luckily, we live on a side of town that doesn't have that much crime, but I just had a car stolen Sunday morning, right out of the garage across the street. We have video of it, they have the license plate. You can find them. They're gone. So I'm a huge proponent with more police presence. And I think that through the whole COVID thing and through all of that change, there was a significant change. I think that you had mentioned that we're starting to see crime increase in certain areas of the city. And I think that police presence will slow that down. So if you can quickly throw some asks inside your package, I don't know if you can.
It's funny.
Everybody here is
Trying to keep some sort of resemblance of a relationship going.
Right, yes.
Thank you, Chief, for explaining that, and I don't know if there's anything to go back to the commission on this.
Did you cover EMS by rescue?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
EMS service, so moving past the fines and local ordinances, I don't think there's anything to go back to the commission, I think they're aware of what's going on. So unless you think otherwise, we'll move on. EMS service fees are at $695,000. What was that? You know, last time that was raised? But last time we.
I don't, but I do know our vendor has made a recommendation to increase the fees, and we've also done a comparison with other agencies, and instead of charging for different levels of service, to going to a flat structured fee. We've also looked at some opportunities in municipalities outside of the state of Florida that are now charging service fees for like lift assist to assisted living facilities and facilities that should be providing that service internally. And that would either balance the workload or create more revenue for the department as well. So we're exploring some of that as well. Also looking at the potential for ordinances to hospitals that create wait times, which then create the unit availability decrease. We don't have as many units to respond to the calls based on the hospital not adequately staffing. And we're exploring some of those as well.
Chief, what is EMS service fees? What specifically are they versus transport fees?
Well, the EMS service fees are fees for our details, so they're like the standby pays.
So those were increased than just last year or the year before.
In the contract, right?
Yeah.
So like when you go to Inter Miami, that money that Inter Miami pays for that.
So yeah, so that was just increased last year. That both on the contract side and also what we're charging.
You're saying service fees were increased last year? EMS service fees?
The EMS service fees, not the transport fees. So the other part was the transport fees,
And that's our next item here.
and that should be in the millions.
I would go on the back of Chief Herring and, well, if that last increase was 2 years ago, then I would not go back to the commission on that.
Does that also include the full cost recovery for special events in that service fee?
Well, the special events are split, so if it's a city event, then no, that's our own overtime per contract. If it's an outside vendor that's bringing the event in, then yeah, there's administrative fees that are tagged in there, as well as a per hour per employee. And there's also some benefit fees that are also in those numbers.
And that's only $695,000. But it's supposed to be full cost recovery, so. Is it truly full cost recovery? Now, are we up to that now?
We're billing, and we're trying to implement processes to be able to recover more from it. So, there could be an issue with just, redeeming. So we have a plan in place to, account for that.
And I'm assuming, please, where do your fees go into that?
So you're talking about a special event such as Tortuga?
Right.
That's paid completely directly to the individual working right now. But we're in the process of changing that, where the city will collect $3 per hour per sworn who works. And the FOP will collect $5 per hour for the hour worked. That's all part of the RFP for the special detail office that we're working on. Right now, the Tortuga that just happened, all those payments were made directly to the staff. So there's no payment made to the city on the police portion for it as of yet, when it's a private detail. But like Chief Colin said, when it's a city event, such as New Year's Eve, that comes directly out of my overtime budget.
Right, but you're putting in hourly personnel cost included in this service fee for fire, correct?
Yeah, plus a benefit. So in the CBA, there's also a portion that goes towards a benefit that's been negotiated, as well as an administrative fee.
So my question is, why is the police not having the setup as,
So,
instead of just money coming directly
Police,
back?
there was a recent negotiation to change the approach as part of the last collective bargaining agreement, and staff is working to implement the.
It's gonna be a third party that administers the details. And they'll do the scheduling and the billing and the payment to the officers. So the city will be out of the administrative piece of that.
The police side, the
On the
fire will
police side,
continue.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you for letting me, but I just wanted clarification. And then if they transport, that
Next
falls
year.
under the transport.
Fire rescue transport fees estimated at 7.3 million, 7.294 million. From my recollection, or from the notes here, it says last increase was 2017. That sound about right? So I would certainly speak to the commission.
Isn't that something that's mostly paid through insurance?
Medicare, Medicaid.
And those rates are set by Medicare.
So I was gonna say,
So
so is there
Medicare
sort
and
of-
Medicaid are, the
much-
insurance side, is the other side, which is where we want to go to a flat, currently it's based upon the level of service that's being provided and the mileage that they're being transported.
Yeah,
We're gonna be recommending to change that so that it's a flat fee across all of that.
I just didn't know where it's discretion is at, how much you can push it, because then,
Well, the Medicare, Medicaid, you can't really push. They're
Yeah,
gonna
that's
pay
what I
what they're
figured, that's what I
willing
was
to
wondering.
pay, so. And, you know, obviously then the other side of it is the collection side of that, you know, the challenges with that.
Sure.
We're hopeful, with lieutenants going on the truck that there'll be the opportunity for better documentation, which will also lead for better collection as well.
So is that 7.3 what's actually like net at the bottom line, or some of that also outstanding?
So for government accounts, it's based on cash received.
So when do you anticipate, chief? That has to go to the commission to increase those set rate.
Ordinance change.
Ordinance change. When do you anticipate going to them to ask for that?
I don't have an answer to that. I'll say by the end of the fiscal year, but you know, sometime between now and then, we need to put all the documents together and need to get on a very robust agenda, and it has to be a 2 meeting for an ordinance change, so.
And the BAB can weigh in and during the presentation. I can always make a recommendation at that time to support when he does that
If
presentation.
you are going to pass notes to the commission about this report, I would suggest just letting them know that they should increase the fees, even though Chief Golan's gonna come on the backside. We're going to them again. More times we drip on them, maybe they'll do it.
The other, anyway, up to that very interesting outlook of adding up all those rate increase and projecting how much more revenue we could get if we add up all of that. Did we do the exercise?
Nope.
I think it would be interesting to have some projection to get a sense for Bob of how much it represents.
Is it 100,000 or is it?
Well, it's
Right.
probably
Yeah.
a few millions from my quick calculation.
I
I
just
don't
know
know the
that-
rates. I would not do it.
I just know that we have a millage facing us with a
Yes.
substantial increase in 3 years. We have building permits going down,
Yeah.
we have revenue going down in that category. We have a market that's slowing down. I mean, we're not projecting what things are gonna be, my goodness. We gotta bring in revenue or raise the millage sooner than later.
And as you're gonna see in the personnel cost projections, salary and benefits are outpacing the.
Yeah.
And Chairman, you said that very clearly,
You're gonna see
yesterday
that
the
in the
workshop
graph, yeah.
session.
But
I didn't hear any response from the
Yeah.
commission about that.
And here we are, we're looking at,
If they don't
you
wanna
know,
raise it.
once we figure out if they instituted all these raises, or if they're gonna take low hanging fruit and raise them, and we're only talking a few $1,000s,
Right.
you're taking little bites out of a big elephant,
Exactly.
and it's a waste of our time.
But I believe it's worth looking at it in more detail with last increase rates and the values of those rates.
Oh, yeah,
If we can
we
get
can go back
more
to them more
access and
specifically.
transparency about that, that would enable us to actually evaluate how much we're saving or impact in additional revenue we talk about.
I think we would need to know on each of these line items what other cities are charging. At least we have a barometer of where we should be. And then we can estimate from there.
So that's interesting you would say that. I started doing my research because I'm a new board member. I looked at the city of Fort Lauderdale book from fiscal year 2025. I was online a lot, looking and drilling down on other cities, especially cities that are comparable in size, local government and number of population residents. And there is a lot available out there transparently. So I think it would be interesting to maybe form a task force among the BAB who could drill down and get more analytics and put those numbers in perspective with other best practices from other
Some
cities.
benchmarking.
Absolutely.
It's a dumb question maybe. Do we have like a city tourism tax specific to the city, not to the state? Cause I just went to Charleston and there was like 7 taxes on my bill. I mean, literally, it was broken out. And we're talking about
Crazy.
penny pinching here and doing this here, but like cities, is it possible to have a city tourism tax that when people come, it comes to the city, not to the county
We're
only?
preempted.
But that.
We are preempted from doing it. I think there's some cities that have it, but they were grandfathered in. There is a tourist tax that Broward County collects as part of the Visit Fort Lauderdale. But really none of that trickles back to us.
Why are we?
And over 40%
State
is collected
preempted.
in our city.
Have we ever, I mean, I know we talk about that in the commission with other things about the money, have we ever actually sat down with the county and said, hey, we need help, like, we are bearing the brunt, I mean, we talk about homelessness, we talk about
Right.
things. But if tourism, we bear the brunt of that because we do have the
Sure.
beaches, and have we had that conversation?
So, and what, we know that what a large percentage of
Over
what they
40%, yeah.
collect. Well, it comes from Fort Lauderdale, but I was gonna say a large percentage of what they collect goes to debt service on the convention center, and I think the
Where's it going?
Panther.
the Panthers Arena. So I
Yeah, the
forgot,
hotel that's.
yeah, the hotel, convention center, Panthers Arena.
Something that's
So a
looked
good
at.
piece of what they collect goes for those three big projects, yeah.
The beach renourishment is
Yeah.
also with the.
Okay,
So that's, I guess, the
Thank you,
kind of
Chair.
hard no.
Thank you.
My presentation's over.
Can I?
First of all, thank you for taking the time, those two additional meetings. I think everyone just saw how, time consuming it is. This is his last term on the board at the end of the year, so whoever's on that committee next year, you see what it entails, so.
I know you have suggestions here, are these like, motions that were. But where do we go, we using this? Have
Well, I think that if we can
suggestions to
communicate to the
increase-
commission our findings and our notes, I mean, if we can send them this, or I don't know.
Maybe we could also take the time, as I suggested a few minutes ago, to review and expand the projection and get into more detail so that we have a better sense of what it could represent as big numbers in terms of additional revenue that we can find. I think that goes hand to hand with the other conversation that we should be having in terms of potential cost savings. And we were tasked to look at that, and I think it's right at the core of the mission of the BAB.
Yeah,
We
so.
can do that on a couple of the big items to see if it makes an impact.
Well, of course,
You know,
the
first
million,
start there.
not the 180,000.
Start there
yes.
first.
Yeah, I know, because I mean, not this, but I look at youth programming, like, are those after-school programs, are those things that are coming in from underserved neighborhoods? And
Yeah.
it's saying like increase fees and yet, something like that where you're only generating 180,000. I don't know that it's worth it to increase fees
No,
for
but-
people that are struggling.
Maybe where the commission's
already.
at too.
But Lisa, when you look at the big lines, okay, business tax, 3.5 million. When you look,
Agree, like those-
with those, and obviously, we're not gonna look at the numbers, we're gonna look at what is being, accomplished
I
behind that.
understand, I'm just saying, I think there's certain categories where it's a little different, a business tax and building permit fees versus a youth program fee where maybe I don't know what that encompasses, but I'm assuming it's maybe after school programs that are keeping kids safe,
So-
off the street, whatever, I don't know.
So the way I looked at this, and the way I think we all should look. If you, in this, is from an unbiased perspective. It doesn't matter to me, because if we're saying, well, if it's only gonna make an incremental change, why do it? Well, then let's reduce fees then. Big difference, let's just reduce it, let's just get rid of the 180,000 completely, give the fields away for free. So the way I'm looking at it is I know that incremental changes, a lot of them make a big change. So if it's 180,000, but we're gonna pull in 230 next year, because we raised, I don't think it's that much. But that across the board everywhere is gonna help the city. That's how I looked at it. Then we could dig it down and say, well, maybe that doesn't make sense. But from an unbiased perspective, coming in, just blank, how I would recommend to you all, that's what I recommend to BAB. However, you decide to communicate this,
So
I'll
let me,
leave that up to you.
so let me ask, Laura, does OMB communicate the findings of the Revenue Estimating Conference Committee to the commission?
Yeah, I'd like to defer to Yvette, though she actually took the lead this year. as our-
Yeah, so no, it doesn't go directly to the city commission. One of the things that's really important to note is that we have analysts within each department that are actually reviewing the revenues, looking at neighboring cities. So if there's a specific revenue that you'd like some more information on, we probably already have that information or can quickly put it together.
Yeah.
So, Ross got the benefit of actually talking to a lot of those subject matter experts during REC. The idea behind REC is really to make sure that we're being transparent in the revenue that we're including in the budget. So, we want to make sure that we're not cooking the books kind of deal. The revenue that we're including is something that we've had a member of the BAB, a member of the Audit Advisory Board, a member of the Finance Department. We've all gotten together for some of those larger revenues, took a look at the trends that are occurring, and then came to a consensus about what those numbers are for, or what they will be in the next budget. That's really the importance of the rec. There are a lot of conversations like Ross is having that comes out of that. And so we're happy to put together any research related to specific revenues. I know Ross has a list here. If these are the lists you want more information on, we can gladly put that together. But as a city, we do dive into these numbers. We do look at our neighboring organizations. And oftentimes there's a reason like Melissa's sharing where it's serving an underprivileged neighborhood. And so we want to make sure that we are, being considerate of that. But it could also be like the business tax. We presented it to the commission. There was a study that was done and the commission made the decision that they didn't feel comfortable with raising the tax at the time. And that was just like a month or two ago, so.
Is there notes on that?
Yeah, I can send out the link to the conference meeting because they had
Hasn't been done since '97.
right, and so they did a full presentation, had a consultant do an analysis, looked at neighboring organization or institutions and cities. And it was still, the decision that was made was not to increase the tax, and I think they were proposing moderate increases.
We consolidated some of the categories, but we did not increase.
Right.
Do you remember why?
Their idea is the economy is challenging and they didn't want to impact our businesses at this time. The increase in revenue, as we talk about some of these, would have been fairly nominal relative to, but they felt like the business impact would have been more significant than the revenue impact to the city.
So then, follow up to that question is, please don't shoot me, but can we make a recommendation to suggest, I shouldn't say recommendation, to the city manager and OMB that you take this list of what Ross put together and do a presentation based upon what was just presented to us at a conference meeting, so the city commission can see everything that we've seen as far as increases, decreases of revenue when they were last raised?
And just to let Bab know, this is a quarter of the pieces that we've gone through.
Sure.
I've got, if you wanna look at them, I have them all here. There's a lot of revenue streams. These are just the ones that
And
stood
you
out.
couldn't share that with the rest of the board?
And I mean,
Can I make a suggestion?
when you were acting city manager, how would you have perceived, is that, you see where I'm going with this? I don't wanna.
Well, the council ultimately gets it, and maybe not, when I say gets this information, but not on that granular level, right? So when we present to them a proposed budget, it has, this revenue, that revenue, that revenue, that revenue, and they could see, a lot of them are flat. So we don't present to them on that granular level. We have this process, the revenue estimating conference, all the different inputs go in, we come to numbers, and that's what we present as the budget, but not on the granular level.
Is there a need to be presented on a grant at this? I mean, they've challenged us to find ways to increase
Exactly.
revenues.
But I think it's our job to, once again, maybe I'm repeating myself, but I think we should have access to a little bit more of what Ross has been able to glean. There are lots of missing blanks in terms of last increase was when and how much was it. And to put it into perspective, I think that wouldn't, without being too granular, would put it into context and allow us at least to make an opinion on how much more revenue we could potentially touch in order to make a better budget.
So communication to the commission that suggests that staff present or that
Share.
allow BAB to present the suggested increases in some various revenues, or some type of communication like that.
Okay.
Can I make a general suggestion too, that I think sometimes we get in the details and what I worry about is just from the short time I've been on here, we go down the details and then the commissions, they know we're not gonna do that anyway,
And it's not a significant enough amount.
So is there a way, because what you wanna do is, how I look at the commission is, we wanna present them, these are the options. You said,
Right, this is what you're saying.
number one, we want
Dollar.
additional revenue additional revenue, we would have to raise fees in this, so then before we go down all these rabbit holes,
To see if there's.
we
any
get some
sort of-
guidance because it's either, hey, raise the millage, increase revenue and cut costs, and we have to look at these as like general buckets, and they said no taxes, yes on additional revenue, and yes on cost cutting. But like, I feel like sometimes if we go down these rabbit holes, they may just say, no, we're not gonna do that.
So I think that what you're suggesting
Yeah.
is right, is if we can have a department or someone pull together some preliminary numbers, is, what
share
was,
with us.
what was the increase back then? If we
Exactly.
did that again now, what would it look
And the
like? And share it with
projections,
us.
and the projections that we can
Yeah.
reasonably work on.
Well, and
if
that
it's-
could be part of one of the presentations that they make
It's
to
$1 million.
the commission, what's the next time? And maybe they could have a revenue section in that I don't know.
At the
Yeah, so
joint
we
meeting.
do the revenue sufficiency analysis and the preliminary budget at that meeting, we could do it.
Add that little piece, maybe?
We could add the, more detailed.
When it sounds like you guys have already had the idea, I mean, you guys already went down this road with the business tax,
Mhm.
so that idea came up and it was shot down.
Yeah.
So like, do you all have other I mean.
No, we gotta go back to that because did they have actual numbers? Did they know?
They did.
Yeah, it was
They did.
very
So we
detailed.
don't know.
Study.
It was robust.
It was very robust.
I was there, it was very detailed.
Yes, it was very detailed.
900,000 business tax.
But the state limits us to 5% increase every other year,
Yeah.
so no matter what, 100,000 every 2 years
But
is your.
but the suggestion was to do 5% every other year in order to
Right.
keep up. Because it's less
They said no.
every year because of
Over a
the.
9-year period.
What was
Your recommendation?
I think my
Right,
point is
with,
that the budget office has already done some of this, like, analysis. Would it be feasible for you all to present to us and saying, these are the things that we have suggested in the past, this was shot down, this is an idea. So that we can collectively look at those, because the commission's gonna have to make a difficult
Either
decision.
they're gonna have to raise taxes.
Right,
Or they're
or
gonna have to.
go back to the work that you've done, yeah.
So we're all saying the same thing. We should have access to that if that's available. And as a BAB, discuss it.
Yeah.
And examine whether or not there are realistic projections that are worth coming to the commission with.
But does this put a dent in anything as opposed to raising the millage? Like if you're talking about two different universes, why are we spending all this
Because
time?
they don't
and
wanna raise the
energy
millage.
right now? I
They just keep
understand,
on
but
saying no.
like, this isn't an alternative to the millage rate increase. It's like saying 10 million, but here I could save you 10 grand. Is that gonna help you make a decision to make 10 million
That's
this year?
what
We don't know what that number is.
I don't know.
That's the problem. We don't know what that number is yet.
And
I wouldn't think it's even
And with all
close.
due respect, we can also
Okay,
have
it's not
the
a-
vision of looking for cost saving ideas. I don't think that we have to be so limited in our scope. I think we were tasked with the idea that we would help with our expertise.
So we can bring this to close to keep moving on.
Yeah.
What is the pleasure of the board? To make a recommendation or do it at the June, incorporate it in the June workshop?
I would suggest doing it at the June workshop because I feel like we could have a more holistic recommendation at that point. And we'll get more information of some of the benchmarking that you requested, which I think is great, potential
That are existing
projections.
as well.
But then I think we want to take the opportunity when we actually have the joint workshop, that this is not, I mean, this is a great point, I love the work, but it's not going to be the only thing I think we're coming up with. So I think it's more holistic that we bring multiple items, including some of the cost cutting at that point, so that we're not too granular, like you say.
Great idea.
And the comment made by the mayor was, what he kind of threw it back to us to look for ways, but he said that it's not a bake sale. We're only raising a few
Yeah.
dollars.
Well, we accept the challenge then. We have to impress the commission.
So
Having a CRA discussion, so.
Yeah,
Right.
so let's,
That's a big one.
Laura, can we put that on, we will incorporate that into the June presentation?
Well, so based on Yvette's volunteering, I believe they're gonna put together some information and get with departments to do a little bit of a deep dive on the revenues identified by Ross. That'll be sent back to you and you
Great.
can consider that as, so in the month of June, you typically get a preliminary budget from the city manager on the general fund budget before you meet with the commission at your joint meeting. So at that point, you can talk through all the presentations, if you have cost cutting suggestions, if you have revenue enhancement options after all of that. So that was kind of my takeaway. Is there anything you'd add?
Nope.
And that part of the presentation, Ross, I'll let it.
Thank you.
over to you and
Makes sense.
we're at the workshop. If that's okay. Very good, thank you. Next order of business is the 2026 budget review presentation.
Process projection.
Yeah. So as you see in the schedule that's in front of you, there will be 3 departments that will present on each of the evenings of the department meeting presentations. Historically, we've allowed department directors 20 minutes to present. You receive their packets and all of their information at the latest, the Friday before the meeting. We try to send it out a little bit earlier because they're pretty thick packets. And in that packet, what you'll have is, you'll see some of their key goals for the next year. You'll see their line item budgets with explanations on any major variances. You'll also see their decision packages, which are what we consider any programmatic changes that they are asking to make that require funding. You'll see those decision packages with any performance measures that go along with them. You'll receive all of that in advance of the meeting. What we're asking is, if you get that packet, you read the packet, and there are some things that you think you wanna really dig in on, and those things are gonna require research of the department, feel free to send us that information in advance, preferably by the Tuesday before, or Monday.
We like
The Monday, so that we have the Tuesday to put together the information. But if you send it to us on Monday, we'll work with the departments to make sure that they're able to answer whatever the questions may be, either in advance or they'll provide the information during their presentation. Our directors have actually asked that we use a timer to make sure that they stay on time, because they want to give their colleagues enough time to present as well. But the 20-minute timeline gives them 20 minutes to present and you all about 20 minutes to ask any questions of each department. There aren't actual presentations. The packets are the presentations, just one thing to keep in mind.
Can I ask a quick question as a first year board member? Seems to be pretty buttoned down and timed. Why didn't we do that for last month's meeting? That was seemed to be no timing on the presentations.
So in
In terms of
prior,
time limit to keep
yeah,
that.
and I can
That
share.
got kind of crazy.
In prior years, we did have timers, and then we sort of moved away from it, and now we're going based on what
That was
happened.
more of a
It's
general
like-
discussion
Going
than
back,
it is-
Yeah, we think it's better.
In terms of anybody that's at large organizations and in meetings, I thought that was
Yeah,
kind of.
it was long.
That was
Yes.
great. Well, it's not only that, and then you do a disservice to the last 3 people that it's just like, all right, see ya.
Right,
Right.
which is
And that's-
why.
And that's inevitable in any meeting setting, so I
Yeah.
don't know why that's not timed, but that's. another
Which is why they've asked for timers, so there will be timers at these.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
I was gonna ask that.
The timers for us too, for feedback.
I mean,
To
but
be fair,
really,
I mean, it's like.
It should be like a proper meeting.
I think it should be 2020, like you said,
Like a
20, if
professional
you
setting.
allow that, that's.
We use the hourglass with sand.
I would. What is
So
that?
Jermaine has an
You're not allowed to go
big
big
big timer. Everyone can see it,
There should be a timer in the morning and everything.
yes. Are there any questions? No, perfect.
Just reinforce, please take the time that weekend and do your homework. It's, I'm the principal and I'm assigning you the.
You said that like for the 7th, we'll get it by that Friday.
By that Friday. Mhm.
Okay.
We usually try a day earlier, but at minimum by that Friday.
So weekend homework.
And so before the departments meet with you, they've met with the city manager, so every department you meet with has already met with the city manager. So she'll have some thoughts for them to get questions.
Very good.
That's the reason we have to kind of stick to this order.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the 2026 personnel cost projection presentation.
This is one of my favorites of
Fasten
the
your
year.
seatbelt.
So
They've
one
taken off that on this one. When you see it.
One of the important things to keep in mind about payroll projections is we actually do them within the Office of Management and Budget. We look at the current employees that are in positions and we project out. We know that our employees are amazing, everyone's gonna receive a merit increase, so we project out merit, we project out COLA. For all of our union contracts, we project out the things that have been outlined in the union contracts. And then for all of our vacancies, we budget at the mid-range, which allows the department some flexibility in how they present an offer. what we wanted to do, because payroll is more than 60% of our budget, we wanted to give you the first look at payroll so that as you're meeting with departments, this isn't the idea that's on your mind, it's really more what their operational concerns are. So this is the snapshot of what the 25 adopted budget looked like for personnel services. So 62.7% of the budget was actually personnel related. So these are the things that kind of move the needle when we talk about budgetary changes.
Of the $450 million
Correct.
budget, not the $1 billion.
Right. We wanted to show you some of the growth in our FTEs. So it's nice to see that as our population has grown, our employee population has actually stayed semi-flat. So in 2016, we had 1,600 general fund employees. 2025, we're up to 1,866. So relative to our population growth, we're seeing that our personnel are staying relatively flat.
Can you go back for 1 second?
Yes, sir.
Looking at from fiscal year 20 to 21, we saw a drop in population. How's that possible?
It's a true up with the census.
Yeah. So.
We exploded. in
Yeah, so what happens is every 10 years, we use the census data. In between, there are estimates that are done by the Bureau of Economic and Business Research, which is based out of the University of Florida. And so we use that for the in-between numbers, but the census, which we know we didn't get great census feedback during this round, the census numbers make it look like there was a drop.
So what's our actual population today?
We're thinking it's about 190,000.
And it blows up during the winter months to what?
So.
So what the data we've looked at is from, it's called Placer AI. It's like a AI software that tracks the number of phones. And it talks about during season and during different times in the day, it can double in
Not that
population.
190
Yeah.
number.
Yeah, so people come into our city to work, you know, in these high rises, people come to visit, and so based on cell phones, it can double or even triples during certain times of the year.
And so this is a breakdown by the different areas. So, you know, public safety, of course, is always one of the highest priorities, and you see that in the growth of our FTEs. Of the 204 FTEs that were added to the general fund since 2016, only 20% of those were not public safety related. So the other 80% were directly towards enhancing public safety.
Those numbers are being inaccurate today?
So it would be a little lower for non-public safety because we just added quite a few public safety related positions through the SAFER grant. So it's a slight tick, but yeah. This is the slide that the chair was talking about a little bit earlier. It shows the difference between our ad valorem growth, which is the black bar, and our salary growth. So you notice that the salary growth is actually outpacing our ad valorem growth. The reason this is significant is because 47% of our revenue actually comes from ad valorem. So that is our biggest revenue. The next one is 10%, which is the fire assessment fee. So it gives you an idea that if ad valorem is not increasing and salaries are increasing, there will eventually be a gap that is
So
hard.
I have a quick question on this, and this might be out of line. If it is, I'll save it, but the last Stantec models we looked at, they're going from 411, and 3 years out going to 470.
What?
As far as the millage,
Millage.
4.11.
Yeah, to 4.7.
Mhm.
I'm sure the commission saw that.
Yes.
What are they hoping that happens?
I think they're addressing each year as it comes with and you know, that's part of the process, because even though we do a lot of long range modeling, the further out you get, the, you know, less accurate the modeling is. So by addressing the current years, I think that's their hope. The thing that we always try to impress upon everyone as we talk about our long range modeling is the decisions that we make today often have, you know, repercussions in the future. So even though today we may not be in a posture of necessarily having to significantly cut anything, as long as we're still making responsible decisions today, the models end up leveling out a lot. So it's really about what we're committing to in the long term, both for the contracts that we enter into as well as our collective
It's just
bargaining agreement.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, it's just my concern that we have a BAB. I think we've had 100% consensus a couple of times about raising millage. And it's a no. I don't understand that. I don't understand how we together, all of us can get together, all of, in good sound and mind, go over everything that we go over, look at this stuff. And they come back and say, no. Eventually, you just said it. Why put pressure on everyone at the last minute? We already have water going up 20% a year.
So I can share that, staff has to bring forward a balanced budget no matter what. It's required by state law. So we're just required to balance. So if it's not raising the millage rate, it means providing options for service changes. Some of the assumptions that we thought things we would do, we might not do. So all of that's a policy decision. And so as staff members, we're just tasked with bringing options to them
Yes, I
based
understand
upon
that.
the
I got it.
policy.
I understand, that's what
Goals,
we are supposed to do, you all and
recommendations,
then us, we bring it
Yep.
to them as well, but I'm saying is that we've had 100% consensus. A couple of times, and we got saved by property taxes and government money. I don't see that this year or next year, so.
And that's why there has to be total transparency, for what, as you're balancing the budget, which you always do try to, are transparent about, but we have to have a clear understanding of, what are we cutting?
Yeah.
And let's,
We're just not funding
so
stuff
that we
that
can
we have on the,
communicate that
on the
clearly to
agenda
the
to
commission that
fix.
in order for them to balance this budget, here's what had to cut. And you have to, number one has to be funded salary benefits or do layoffs. When they're not going to do, we're not recommending layoffs. But it has to come out of other things besides salary and benefits. So we all have to be on the same page of understanding what are we truly sacrificing to get this budget every year balanced.
We see it.
Yeah.
It's every year I sit here, we're seeing these bars get more displaced.
But what is actually truly being, the departments aren't being able to function, what's affecting their operational functions?
I don't know if cost efficiency or performance should be part of the conversation. With less employees, you may achieve the same results or the same outcomes. Maybe that's one way of looking at the issue as well. And I'm not saying it's the only way, but in the private sector, it generally is. And why not in local government? I mean, you've all heard and read that the mayor of Miami-Dade has requested her departments to work on a 10% reduction, in budget. No, in staff, in budget. And it's an exercise that they're willing to do. It comes from the mayor of Miami-Dade. I think it might be inspiring to, when we look at the key performance indicators that the head of department use as a performance that are important to them and they define is what kind of outcome do you accomplish with 10% more or 8% more budget increase every year? When we look at I looked at the budget of the city, the operation budget of the city for the past 10 years, it's grown at a pace that's incredible. So maybe there are questions about how the city operates and cost efficiency and performance. I don't think that should be not part of the conversation.
Large part of that is, union contracts, fire.
And we're gonna get into that, so let's proceed and then we'll circle back around and
Like 9% increase.
Awesome.
wish the city manager could be part of this.
So this is just a snapshot of our bargaining groups. So almost 90% of our employees are represented by a bargaining group. That's really important because it means that there are contracts that drive how we handle pay increases, how we handle pensions, all of those things are bargained by many of our employees. And here's a snapshot of the timelines for those contracts ending. We completed IAFF and FOP more recently, so we still have one more year left on those contracts. But for Teamsters and Federation, we're about to begin opening the negotiation sessions for those groups. And those groups make up about 37% of our employees.
What have we budgeted
That's
increases
a
then?
good question. The next slide will show you what we have as placeholder numbers. And, you know, preliminary is in red because this is all very preliminary information. But what we're using as a placeholder number for our COLA is 3%. For IAFF, we go through a process where we look at our neighboring organizations and do a 75th percentile calculation. We have a placeholder number, which is the max that they could possibly receive under their collective bargaining agreement of 4%. So we'll have to see what that landscape review looks like before we finalize that number. And then for FOP, the increase will be 3% in 2026. And their number is tied to the Social Security COLA, but it has a floor of 3%. So Social Security COLA was like 2.5%. But because they have a floor of 3%, we're budgeting the 3%.
Is that an annual or is that the term of the contract?
That's during the term of each year of the contract that is in place. It's important to note that in addition to the cost of living adjustment, our employees also receive a merit. So merit is based on performance. For most of our employees, that would be about 3%. For IAFF, it depends on this, and FOP, it depends on the step that they're moving from, but the average step is about 4.3% for IAFF and 3.6% for FOP. And this kind of gives you a feel for what those steps look like. So as you're moving from year to year, it shows you what those step increases are. In addition to salary, our IAFF members also receive paramedic pay, or if they're an EMT, an EMT pay. And so there are different amounts that go into their total compensation package, which is above and beyond just the salary that they receive. So most of our firefighters are paramedic firefighters. So in addition to their salary, they receive a 15% paramedic certification pay. This is just a snapshot for FOP, and their package looks a little bit different. So in addition to their salaries, they also receive an assignment pay. So whether or not they're in patrol, whether or not they've been here over 10 years and are in patrol, whether they're in a non-patrol unit, there are various amounts that go in. And then for our specialty pays, a lot of our officers are also on specialty units. And those have either 2.5% of their salary or 5% of their salary as the on-call amount for being in those units. One of our other very significant costs.
I'm sorry, Yvette,
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity for both police and fire, what's the distribution among those pay grades? Is there more on the higher level in terms of volume, in terms of budget, or is there more on the medium range or lower range?
Yeah, so if you'd asked me a year or two ago, I would have said a lot of our staff are actually topped out because they end up being at, they've been with us long enough that they end up at the top of the range. So we see more topped out staff than we necessarily see people at the beginning of the salary range. Both police and fire have had significant turnover over the last few years and have done a great job recruiting new officers. And so we're seeing that shift a little bit, which is why we're not seeing salaries grow as rapidly as we thought that they would. And it's just because of the turnover within those groups. Usually when you're bringing on new cadets or new officers, it's.
But to be clear, the volume money paid is more on the higher end.
On the higher end, yes. Health insurance is also a very significant cost driver for our staff. So the general fund, or the city contributes we're projecting $18,700 per employee that participates in the health plan. And we're self-insured, so what that means is the city is actually transferring money into the health plan for employees, and then any claims or activity actually comes out of that plan. We've seen significant growth in this area, and part of that was because we were at the lower end of our neighboring organizations back in 2017. And so there was a significant push to increase the amount of the city's contribution, not just by the amount of the increase, which we attribute to Gallagher, this Gallagher actuarial study, but also an additional 2%, which was, the idea was to help us catch up so that we would be contributing the same amount as neighboring organizations. It's a really important recruitment and retention tool for our employees. And now we're seeing, you know, that our contribution's $18,000, almost $19,000 per employee. We don't contribute for vacancies except for in FOP. We contribute for every sworn officer. We provide a payment over to FOP for administering their health insurance.
We're still self-insured.
But police has their own plan,
Right.
so two separate.
So here's our retirement plan comparison. And, you know, everyone comes to local government because we have amazing retirement plans. So this is just a snapshot of what those look like for police and fire. They are jointly in a plan. And it kind of shows you that police and fire, the percent of covered payroll, and it's a weird number, it's like an actuarial determined number, is about 30% of covered payroll. We see that number being closer to like 25 in practice, but about 25% of salaries we end up contributing as our annual arc for police and fire. We have a closed plan, which was the general employee pension plan. That plan is now closed. And then we had a 401A plan, which is also now closed. We're now seeing a trend of more of our employees being in the Florida retirement system. We began all employees hired after December 31st of 2020 are actually hired directly into the FRS plan.
Mandatory.
Yes. And that contribution percent is about 13.63 for regular class. There are some different rates for special class or elected officials. And so this gives you an idea of what that costs the city each year. So in 2017, we were making about $62 million in retirement contributions. Really, the amount in 2026 is still leveling off at about 68 million. The one thing to keep in mind here is we still need our updated police and fire actuarial report, and that will, you know, increase our contribution. And then we're still finalizing the information for our general employee retirement contribution. So there are some levers that we can pull on that report as well. But it gives you a feel for $68 million of our budget, and this is all funds, so just keep that in mind. But $68 million of our budget is going directly for retirement contributions. And a lot of times there are questions about whether or not we're actually funding retirement significantly. So this gives you a trend of our retirement funded ratios. As you can see, we are very actively funding our retirement plans. One thing that's important to note is this includes a special obligation bond that we took out back in 2012 to ensure that we were fully covering the costs of those retirement plans. So that's why our funded ratio is so high.
Why is it slowing down? I mean, it was impressive in 2021.
So really, yeah, the big thing for around 24, as you start seeing those changes, are plan changes. So last year when we opened 2 years ago, when we opened negotiations with police and fire, that was one of the significant things that they requested was some plan changes. And then for our general employees, we actually just offered a COLA, which also, so there are some plan changes that.
And a couple other things that affect those funded ratios are the boards for both of those plans have been slowly reducing the investment assumptions. So that will have a decrease in your funded ratio. And then Florida is requiring new mortality tables be instituted, I think over the next 2 years, and those will also have a small negative impact on those funded ratios.
So this is the slide that shows you the growth for this year. So we're anticipating that our salaries and benefits will grow about 4.64%. And the number 14 million is a big number, but when you look at the percentages, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in terms of turnover. Because if you anticipate that we're budgeting about 3% for merit and 3% for COLA, you would anticipate like a 6% increase. But because we have turnover within the organization, we're not increasing at that same rate. So the increase is about 4.6% over the next year. And again, these are very preliminary numbers and we'll still have to lock in some of the contract related items.
So if we get, say, the assumption of a 6% assessed value increase, what does that equate to? How many millions of dollars? Versus
6%.
We're going with about 7%, and I think it equates to about the $14 million.
That's why we're.
What's that on the millage?
Oh, sorry, we're going with
How much is that?
we're going with 7%, which is a $22.5 million
It's at the
increase.
411.
So 7%, so am I getting this right? It's 28 basis points? No. 2.8 almost 3 basis points. We're going from 4.11 to 4.14.
No, sorry.
Taxable value.
Taxable value growth. So how much
Got
we,
it.
yes.
Not the.
Not the
okay.
millage rate.
Gotcha, but
Yes.
they were projecting 6% on Stantec.
Tantex, so
Yeah.
there you're projecting, so but my point is, that 7%'s eating this is all eaten up right automatically with that 7%.
So
By
my,
salary.
my question now is what, if we say, all right, well, salaries are growing at 4.64, is that right?
Yes.
Right? So why can't we increase the millage by 4.64%? What would that do to the monies that come in? How does that translate to a millage amount? We could just match it. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know what numbers would look like. That's going part to your point. How much, you know?
Yeah, so that would be like $11 million.
Okay. Just saying. Now we have a shortfall of 3, not 14. And all we're doing is saying, commission, just raise the millage by how much our salary and benefits are growing. That's it.
So I'm sorry, is there someone else? One of the things that came up during the meeting yesterday was public safety overtime. So we just wanted to provide a snapshot of public safety overtime. So this is fire rescues overtime. It's a 5-year snapshot. As you can see, the red bar is actuals, the black bar is our budget. And we were significantly over budget in a number of years, but we were also having significant vacancies within the department. Last year, we got to have a party for the chief because he is amazing. But really by filling the. You're getting far. But I mean, it tells the story of what we were saying would happen. So we said, you fill the positions that you have associated with, the staffing of your organization and you see a downturn in overtime. And that's what happened. So in 24 was the first time in many years that we actually came in under budget for overtime. Of course, there were staffing changes that occurred. We had
14 people we added?
So at that time it was 16.
17.
Yeah.
With strategic changes.
Yes.
Our daily staffing, which afforded us the ability to have that reduction. So,
But interestingly enough, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, Commissioner Earps yesterday during the workshop pointed out, and I think you confirmed that overtime has less of an impact on the budget because we don't pay pension and benefits on the overtime, correct? So the cost of overtime is sort of reducing. I mean, it's nice to have full vacancy.
It's still more money.
Well, that's not what we heard.
But the other piece of what he also had said during that comment was in regards to burnout. And so we have minimum staffing requirements in order to provide adequate protection to the city. And inevitably, what'll happen is if you don't have enough staffing, and you get to points where you have mandatories. And normally those mandatories fall on holidays or inopportune times, which then create burnout amongst the employees relatively.
So it's a
quickly.
balancing act, would you say?
Very much so. The other thing that you see is, recently the LA fires and having enough firefighters or having enough staff readily available to respond to that. If you're utilizing a model like that where you're backfilling with overtime all the time, then when a larger event takes place, such as a hurricane or a large fire, you're not going to have enough staffing to respond to that.
One of the things we want to make sure that we impress upon everyone is that we actually review this quarterly. We look at the highest overtime earners because we want to make sure that we're not burning out our staff, or we're at least identifying the people that may be, a challenge in terms of the amount of hours that they're working in overtime. So it's not something that we just look at the end of the year. The chief is looking at it daily. We're looking at it quarterly, providing that information to the city manager to help determine if there's a shift that's needed.
And there's multiple drivers on that. As we said, the special details are one driver on that. Another driver is also deployments. So if we have any type of FEMA deployments or state deployments, such as in the last week, we had an individual was helping in Kentucky with the floods through FEMA. That is all overtime drivers. So those are different variables that are in there.
But you recover that.
Those are recoverable, but it's not indicated on this that those are recoverable with funding.
And the last slide is really on the police overtime. So one of the conversations that came up yesterday was how we increase the budget. So in general, unless there is a programmatic shift as it relates to overtime, we're increasing it based on the amount that salaries are increasing. So we increase based on the anticipated COLA and the anticipated merit that would happen. So in this case, it's a 7% increase that we were doing in over the 25 budget. I think it should have been 25, but it was over the 25 budget to increase for 2026. There are some smaller shifts that occur that they're minor. So like if we have more reimbursable overtime, and we're seeing that trend over a 3-year period. I think this year that trend was like 75,000. About 75,000 in additional overtime. We're making sure that we're accounting for those things. But as you're looking at an $8 million overtime budget, it's not gonna move the needle with $75,000. But this is just to show you how we actually develop that budget. And the idea is supposed to be that as we do programmatic changes, then we make the shifts associated with the overtime budget. And it,
Chief Schultz, are you requesting, or I guess we'll see next week or whenever, are you requesting some personnel?
That's a question, and I don't wanna answer it tonight.
You don't have to, we'll wait.
Let's just wait.
We can wait.
Presentation.
We can wait.
yeah. One of the important things to note with PD is historically their vacancies have offset a lot of their overtime overages. So even though this chart shows a pretty significant overage in the last few years, they've also had significant vacancies, which help account for the reason that you're not seeing as dramatic of an overage in terms of their overall budget. And so that's all we had for personnel. Again, this is 60% of the budget, so we wanted to make sure we had a meeting dedicated to sharing this information with you all. If you have any questions, just let me know. Yes, sir.
I do have one. Last year, commission called up for retirees that weren't part of the current retirement plan to the tune of how many million to that? And they voted to spread it over how many years? And is that figured into that 62.7%, or is it a separate line item?
Yeah, so it is figured in because it is part of a retirement cost. It's $2 million a year that we're budgeting for it over 7 years.
So, but it is in that 62.7%.
Correct.
Very good. I just want to make sure that it wasn't, if it was separate, then we have to add that on top of the. We have it on the agenda now. Are there Are there any recommendations? Communications, that's the next thing, communications to the city commission. And board member comments.
So I mean. I don't like that. I think that we're looking at is giving them a reason to raise the millage. Or at least a line item that would they could use to say, well, this is a reason why we should raise the millage. Wages are going up by, what was the number, 4%, why can't we raise the millage by 4%? That would have raised $11 million off of the debt.
What Melinda suggested earlier, I thought was an interesting idea, is to look at the things holistically and take our time before having a serious communication to the city commission in regard with potential cost savings, amount of increased revenue that we could find. I think if we have a more holistic approach with different components, and it will require a little bit of time and work from the BAB, I think we will be stronger when we come with this commission.
So this is just as me,
Yeah.
my feeling is, I think we get through the presentations, the month of May. June 1st, we'll have a confirmed projection from the county assessor, property tax assessor. We'll know what percentage, and we can incorporate that into our June presentation as a suggestion.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather communicate it at that time with them. And I think what we need to do is really thoroughly think out and work and get ready for that presentation. And we'll do a PowerPoint at that presentation, correct?
Correct. We do a PowerPoint of the preliminary budget information at that presentation.
And then Stantec will be there with the 10-year revenue sufficiency, which will.
And we could have a slide with some of our just thoughts or ideas that you challenged us from the
Right.
15th meeting.
Right.
And here's some of the things that we as the BAB
I think we
just
should
go
look
out
at.
The
there.
revenue that we're talking about, you're talking about cost savings things,
They're different.
and then the millage.
I think introducing the benchmarks, across, across comparable cities, different local government formats might be also an interesting perspective. We often,
That sounds good. I just,
look at ourselves only.
Yeah, very good. So there's no other communication right now needed.
Yeah, I don't think so, because I think we're all
I think
agreeing that
that-
we're gonna
Yeah.
try and put together a nice little
Package.
package of a few things
Okay.
that.
Let's be better prepared.
Okay.
Just go around the table, one quick round robin. Board thing, Melissa?
I'm good, I think.
You're on the same page.
I'm good.
Okay, and since this was Ms. Smith's third meeting in a row, your staff has to.
She was here last meeting. She came late.
She was?
I believe she was. She came late.
No, not Mildred.
Oh. You said that?
Desiree,
Does yesterday count? Because she was there yesterday.
that's not a regular
It's not
meeting.
mandatory.
Yeah.
3
She's on the
meetings,
board.
it's mandatory, and she's missed 3 meetings.
I don't think she's ever been here.
I haven't met her.
Yeah, 0 and 2, this makes the third one.
We never even introduced her.
No, that's
Never
what I'm
made
saying. So
So, based on the city's protocol, it's a, automatic resignation, so there'll be a communication that goes out to her. To let her know that based upon.
Will this be-
not this board,
consecutive
it's
meetings.
mandatory.
It's not, yeah, it's not a decision
Just
for
bring
us.
that, point that out.
Is there a known reason for her absence? I mean, have you been in touch?
I'm not sure Charmaine reached out to her. I thought she was planning to attend tonight based upon the communication that
Busy.
Charmaine sent.
And
out.
then she can appeal to the chair, correct?
So I think the process is, and I don't want to get this wrong, but my understanding based on history is she could ask the commissioner who appointed her to reappoint her. And then the commissioner would
Is that how that
reappoint her,
works?
because we've had that before where, when I was, director of OMB, where because we have to sign off on the communication to the member to say, hey, based upon you missing 3 meetings, it's an automatic resignation. And then she could reach out to her commissioner and be reappointed. It would just go back to the commission to reappoint her. If there was some special circumstance.
Okay, that's how that works. But she had the, I thought one letter that I've received that said that they can appeal to the chair.
I,
But could you?
we can look at it, yeah, typically it'll go through to be reappointed though,
Okay,
I think if she wants to be on the board, she can get back on the board.
right?
okay. Would you adjourn? Cool.
Good meeting.
Great meeting.
Lot of
Great
information.
discussion. And we're only at 9 minutes over, so I'm getting a little better. We were 39 minutes over last time.